Sign this, or I make you disappear." The words were not a plea for help, but a hostile corporate takeover of my life, sounding out the loneliest Christmas Eve I had ever known. I traced the direction of the threat, straight up the barrel of a Beretta 92 aimed square at my chest. His eyes, Mr. Yoon's eyes, were cold, absolute, and utterly indifferent to the terror I felt. My gaze slid from the tattooed grip of the pistol to his other arm, an anchor of raw power clutching two silk-wrapped bundles. Car seats. They were the only things tethering him to consciousness, preventing him from collapsing entirely into the sickening, viscous darkness staining the pristine marble. I found him, the ghost owner of the villa, critically injured, surrounded by the fallout of his corporate world. He was at Chable, demanding a signature. I was Chanel L. Bennett, holding a mop, about to sign away my future. This was my NDA, sealed with a bullet and a baby's hiccup. I had signed the paper, my name, Chanel L. Bennett, now legally bound to a criminal enterprise on Christmas Eve. I had just exchanged my freedom for his survival. The moment I signed, the gun was no longer the primary threat. The silence of the villa was. Every second we stayed in the service quarters, sticky with the dark evidence of the attack, increased the risk of the assassins returning for cleanup. The lift, I ordered, forcing the terror to become pure command. "Where's the secure floor?" Mr. Yoon was fading, the initial adrenaline that had kept him upright, signing contracts and aiming a Beretta, finally receding. He was heavy, impossibly heavy, a dead weight in a $6,000 suit. I hauled him, half carrying, half dragging, through the spotless staff corridors I usually polished. As I pulled him close, I noticed the underlying scent beneath the metallic tang of his injury, an intoxicating, expensive cologne, sharp and clean, the fragrance of unapproachable power. "B2, he managed, the Korean accent thick with pain, pointing vaguely toward the inconspicuous panel hidden behind a stainless steel cleaning utility cupboard. My invisible status as a cleaner was now our lifeline. I punched the code, pulling the bleeding boss and the two sleeping bundles, Hyung-yoon and Nari-yoon, into the small, soundproof service lift. The close proximity was stifling. He was solid, lean muscle even in his wounded state. His dark, perfect hair brushed my cheek as I braced him against the wall. This forced intimacy with a man who had just signed my life away was a dangerous, buzzing wire. When the lift chimed, announcing our arrival at the opulent B2 floor, a wing reserved for VIP guests who never came, I found myself facing a pristine, expansive suite. This was where the operation would happen. Getting him onto the king-sized bed was an ordeal. I wrestled the jacket off, tearing the custom stitching. I caught a glimpse of his torso, a landscape of sculpted muscle and elegant, intricate tattooing that disappeared beneath the waistband of his trousers. The sight was undeniably magnetic, a beautiful map of secrets and violence. I tried to focus on the task, but the proximity to that raw, animal strength, vulnerable yet still imposing, sent a nervous energy spiking through my clinical focus. I immediately went to the area he indicated, finding the hidden biometric safe. Inside was a treasure trove of illegal supplies, military-grade trauma kits, high-potency opioids for bags, and neatly arranged tins of specialized infant formula. The meticulous organization was unnerving. I secured the twins first, placing Kyung and Nari carefully in the massive closet. Then I turned my attention back to the bleeding man. I had to focus entirely on the clinical task, to treat him as a specimen, not the most attractive, terrifying man I had ever met. "You are going to feel this," I warned him. I threaded the thick suture needle with precision, my hands surprisingly steady. I began the incision, widening the entry point. The tissue was shredded. He didn't scream, but a low, guttural sound tore from his chest, and his eyes clamped shut. Even in agony, his jaw was rigidly set, a perfect, agonizing profile of endurance. I worked quickly, determined to minimize the suffering of this man who now controlled my fate. When the fragment of lead clinked onto the stainless steel tray, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I finished the sutures, cleaned the area, and started in 4-drip. When I was done, sweat stinging my eyes, I looked at the man lying pale against the silk sheets. Mr. Yoon was stable, alive, and utterly dependent on me. The physical act of saving him, of touching him, of seeing him broken, had shattered the wall between us, replacing fear with a terrifying, intimate connection. I had just saved the life of a kingpin, securing my own future, but permanently sealing my life inside this golden, dangerous cage. My contract had begun, and I was already addicted to the danger. The quiet of the menorah was punctuated by the rhythmic sigh of the ocean outside and the soft, repetitive click of the security system reindexing. Mr. Yoon was definitely stronger now, having survived his Christmas Eve trial. He could walk the length of the suite, though he did so like a predatory cat, testing his limits. The atmosphere was less hospital room and more negotiation table. I was tired of being a highly paid ghost. My medical tasks were becoming routine, and the twins, Kyung Yoon and Nari Yoon, were placid, healthy distractions. I needed an intelligence briefing, not just a paycheck. My survival depended on knowing the enemy. I set a freshly prepared 4-bag beside him and cleared my throat. I need the full intelligence brief, I stated, my voice professional, detached. I can heal the wound, but I can't protect this location if I don't know the threat profile. Who is the traitor, and why did he risk a hit on an exiled mafia boss? He stopped pacing, his gaze sharp and calculating. He seemed perpetually surprised that I, the cleaner, possessed the audacity and the analytical framework to demand answers. You signed the NDA, he reminded me, the words a low, dangerous rumble. I signed a contract for service and silence, not ignorance, I countered, meeting his gaze steadily. If I failed to predict the next move because you withheld intelligence, that contract is void because we both die. So, Mr. Yoon, let's talk about the shareholders' agreement. That earned me a faint, almost imperceptible tilt of his head, a signal of grudging respect. He lowered himself onto the chaise lounge, finally deciding I was an asset worth the risk of information. The attack was not about territory or street operations, he began, speaking slowly, deliberately. It was about succession. My organization is dynastic. My position as the heir apparent has been challenged for years. The traitor is my father's younger brother, my uncle. He believed my period of exile here in Durban was a sign of weakness, an opportunity to eliminate me and break the line of succession. My fingers tightened around the metal clip of the force stand. So, a family dispute. Parricide and fratricide. Standard high-level corporate maneuvering. Lethal maneuvering, he corrected softly. But the twins. He paused, the first true hesitation I had seen. He spoke the names Kyung and Nari with a possessiveness that was nearly painful to witness. They're the critical factor. If I am eliminated, the council, the ruling body of the organization, would usually default to my uncle as the next in the direct bloodline. But my daughters complicate the claim. They're the new generation, the undeniable proof of my lineage. I realized the horror of the situation. He wanted to eliminate you and capture them. He wouldn't kill the children. He'd use them as leverage against the council, claiming custody to secure his own inheritance. Mr. Yoon's dark eyes confirmed the brutal logic. He wants the power, but he needs the legitimacy. Kyung Yoon and Nari Yoon are the ultimate prize. He failed to take them, which is why he failed to take the entire organization. The scale of the threat expanded in my mind. This wasn't a criminal hiding from rivals. This was a prince fighting for a throne. And the 2 tiny lives I was guarding were the absolute core of the organization's existence. I wasn't just fixing a bullet wound, I was protecting the keys to a global criminal empire. Understood, I said, a sense of cold, terrifying purpose settling over me. The threat is internal, immediate, and focused entirely on the children. We are not safe until the traitor is neutralized and the council is secured. He nodded once, the silent gesture sealing our partnership. He saw the fire in my eyes, not the fear of the cleaner, but the calculating logic of the medical student. He respected my professionalism, easing the tension that had suffocated the room since I signed that paper. We were still captive, but now we were co-conspirators. He had given me the intelligence, and in return, I had given him something he hadn't had since the betrayal, a partner who saw the structure, not just the gore. The fragile sense of control I'd gained from understanding the succession structure was instantly shattered when the secure door chimed with an access code. Mr. Yoon, who was sitting on the chaise lounge looking remarkably recovered, became instantly rigid. He grabbed the remote I'd placed nearby and killed the live security feed, plunging the room into artificial quiet. "A loyalist," he hissed, his eyes darting to the closet where Kyung-yoon and Nara-yoon were sleeping soundly. "His name is Han. He's clean, but he is a soldier. You say nothing about the children. Nothing about the wound. What am I supposed to say?" I whispered, scrambling to clean up the medical equipment, the force stand, the gauze, the antibiotic creams, shoving them into the hidden safe with frantic efficiency. "Your staff. My exclusive, highly paid, temporary cleaner. You speak only when spoken to. Your only words are yes, Mr. Yoon, and no, Mr. Yoon. And if he asks you anything about my movements, you say I've been conducting continuous video conferences with the Tokyo office." He fixed me with a look so cold it felt like a physical blow. "He is here for business. The business is lethal. Do not get in the way of the business." Before I could fully process the shift from fragile patient to absolute commander, the door opened. The man who entered was not a doctor or a lawyer. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that made Mr. Yoon's shredded Italian number look like a thrift store find. He moved with the focused stillness of a predator. He glanced at me for a split second, taking in my pristine, new, villa-issued uniform, the one that had replaced my rain-soaked cleaner's clothes, and dismissed me instantly. "Boss," the man, Han, acknowledged, bowing low. He used the title with reverence, a weight of authority settling over the room that erased any doubt about Mr. Yoon's true identity. He was not merely a wealthy man with an injury. He was a mafia boss, and this was his lieutenant. Han started immediately, speaking in rapid, hushed Korean, pulling out a hardened laptop and displaying schematics and data flows. I couldn't follow the specifics, but the tone was tense, focused on security, leverage, and neutralizing a threat. My analysis had been correct. This was a war room, and I was the ghost in the machine. I focused on the domestic tasks, pouring Han a glass of water from a crystal carafe, keeping my movements silent and subservient. I listened with half an ear, desperate for any shred of intelligence. Then Han made a slight movement towards the window, a casual shift to look at the sweeping ocean view. Mr. Yoon's voice, sharp and dangerously low, cut him off in Korean. Han froze instantly, the gesture unfinished. He didn't look out the window. He never even made it to the glass. Later, after Han had departed with another deep bow, the silence was thicker than ever. Mr. Yoon watched me as I finished wiping the counter. "The rules, Chanel," he said, using my name for the first time since the NDA, the familiarity laced with warning. "You need to internalize them instantly." I kept wiping, my focus on the gleaming stone. "The window is a security hazard." "Got it." "Rule 1, you never look outside. This villa is our perimeter. Assume any window is a sniper scope." "Rule 2, the children do not exist. Their names are never spoken to anyone but me, and never where a microphone might be hidden." "Rule 3, he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You never, ever mention the mother of the twins. She is irrelevant to this operation. She is either a target or a liability, and her name is a weakness that will be exploited by the traitor." The rules were brutally simple, designed for maximum survival and maximum secrecy. I felt the contract tightening around my throat. I had thought I was signing on as a nurse. I had signed on as an operative in a clandestine operation. The mention of the twins' mother, or lack thereof, was a fresh, cold shock. It meant this entire high-stakes family drama was being played without a queen, leaving Kyung-yoon and Nara-yoon utterly vulnerable. I finished my task, my expression neutral. "Understood, Mr. Yoon," I replied, the practiced deference hiding a surge of terrifying, new resolve. I wouldn't call the police. I couldn't. I was trapped by the money, the NDA, and the profound, innocent vulnerability of two babies whose very existence was a death sentence. I had no choice but to learn the rules of this game and play it better than the boss himself. The villa was an expert at silence, absorbing all sound until the air itself felt heavy with secrets. That night, Mr. Yoon's system crashed. A savage fever spiked, burning through his recovery like wildfire. The heavy sandalwood of his cologne was now mingled with the sharp, fevered scent of his skin, an intoxicating, dangerous mix that filled the luxurious air. I moved with the efficiency of my training, my cotton uniform suddenly feeling too thin against the intense heat radiating from the sheets. I had to treat him aggressively, sponge his body down to break the fever. It was a purely clinical task, yet the moment I placed a cool, damp cloth on his sculpted chest, just above the clean line of the bandage, the clinical detachment shattered. Beneath the fever and the expensive bespoke clothing, he was a map of power. The intricate, dark tattoos that disappeared into the fabric of the sheet were mesmerizing, an artful geography of secrets I now knew existed. I was touching the source of absolute power, stripped bare and vulnerable, and the danger was electric. I forced my gaze up, focusing only on the rise and fall of his breath. While I worked, alternating between cool compresses and checking the sluggish foredrip, the twins, Kyung-yoon and Nara-yoon, sensed the distress. They began to fuss. I picked up Nari, holding the tiny, warm weight against my shoulder, trying to soothe her with a low, off-key lullaby. It was the contrast, the fragile infant in my arms, the powerful, burning man in the bed, that somehow made the moment so intensely intimate. He started talking then, lost in the fever and the potent cocktail of medication. He spoke in Korean, the language of his betrayal, but the raw pain of the words sliced through the cultural barrier. He knew, he mumbled, his voice tight with confusion. He had the codes. He told father. The exile was permanent. I continued to rock Nari, my professional mask rigid, but my mind was on fire. His voice, hoarse and thick, was pouring out the truth, his uncle, the traitor. The man who saw his power slipping and used family ties to stage a coup. I was terrified he'd snap back to lucidity, but the information was too crucial, too intoxicating. He shifted violently, tearing his wounded shoulder free from the sheets. The money, the lineage, he wanted it all. Wanted me erased before the council could vote. The humiliation was palpable, a deeper wound than the bullet. When I leaned in to adjust the compress that had fallen, he caught my wrist, a grip surprisingly strong, burning hot against my cool skin. His dark eyes, usually razor-sharp, were unfocused now, swirling with fever and a deep, raw regret that bypassed his defenses and went straight to my core. "The lie," he muttered, his thumb brushing the rapid pulse point on my inner wrist. It was a caress of possession, a moment where the mafia boss asserted his claim over the staff, fever or not. It was the lie that destroyed everything. My breath hitched. I felt an undeniable pull, a terrifying current of attraction to this broken, vulnerable, dangerous man. He said, he told the council that. I failed the test. The last mission. He took my right to inherit. The words were thick with shame. I didn't pull away. Instead, I gently placed my free hand on his forehead, my thumb stroking the perfect arch of his brow. The professional distance was annihilated. I was touching him not just as a nurse, but as a keeper of secrets, seeing the desperate father beneath the ruthless mask. I placed Nari back in her car seat. I stood by his bedside, gazing down at the intricate, elegant tattoos on his arm, no longer seeing corporate codes, but a map of the secrets he was now spilling. The line between employee and confidant was shattered, replaced by an intimate, dangerous awareness. I was the keeper of his secret, the witness to his absolute undoing, and the only person on the planet who saw the frightened, desperate heart beneath the ruthlessness. The contract had begun, and the danger had become utterly, terrifyingly irresistible. The moment the satellite phone chimed, the fragile piece of the menorah was annihilated. It wasn't a ringtone. It was a low, resonant harmonic tone that felt like a predator's heartbeat vibrating through the glass desk. Mr. Yoon's head snapped up. The lucid calm I admired was instantly replaced by a coiled, lethal tension. His eyes, dark and sharp, threw a silent command at me: silence. Now. I was dressing Kyung-yoon, positioning her tiny body just out of the line of sight from the desk. My hands froze on her floral sleeper. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I knew this was the enemy. Mr. Yoon hit the secure video function, and the man who appeared on the screen was corporate evil incarnate. Uncle On. He was impeccable, handsome in a cold, sterile way, his face fixed in a polite expression that was infinitely more terrifying than a snarl. He didn't look like a mafia boss. He looked like a man who signed death warrants in triplicate during a board meeting. They exchanged a few rapid-fire phrases in Korean, a language that, in this context, sounded like bullets. Then On settled back, his gaze sweeping past his nephew. On spoke in flawless English, a pause before the final, venomous strike. Minjun, Durban is truly lovely this time of year. But that spectacular ocean view is wasted on a man conducting business alone. I regret missing the finalization of your unfortunate business trip. He wasn't talking about money, he was talking about bodies. He knew Mr. Yoon was injured, and he knew he was still in the villa. Then, the true horror. On's eyes locked onto the background, zooming past Mr. Yoon and finding me, holding the infant. He paused, his lips curving into a slow, chilling smile that was aimed directly at my face. I see you acquired a charming asset. A shame to compromise such clean stock. Do ensure she signs the permanent liability waiver, nephew. Loose ends are so tedious for the organization. The call cut instantly, leaving a silence thick with ozone and pure, unadulterated fear. I stood there, feeling On's cold gaze still burning into my skin. He had seen me. I was no longer an invisible cleaner. I was officially designated as a liability. Mr. Yoon slammed his fist onto the glass desk, a sound that cracked the silence like a whip. He knows everything, he ground out, the fury in his voice shaking the foundations of the room. He has eyes on the perimeter. He's waiting for the moment we expose ourselves. My heart hammered, a desperate, animal rhythm. My first instinct was flight, but it was immediately overwritten by something stronger, something fierce and terrifyingly territorial. I looked down at Kyung-yoon, whose little hand had curled around my thumb. Then I thought of Nari-yoon, sleeping nearby. They were helpless, perfect, and now under my watch. On had just threatened my assets. I had always chased control. I hated being poor, I hated being powerless, and I absolutely despised failure. Now, the stakes were life itself, and the price of failure was not debt. It was two tiny, innocent lives being dragged into a corporate massacre. I placed Kyung back in her car seat with deliberate, calm movements. I walked across the room, my steps steady, right up to Mr. Yoon. I put my hands flat on the desk, leaning into his furious face, forcing him to meet my gaze. He said he's waiting for you to move, I stated, my voice low and dangerously even. We won't. We use this villa as the bait, and we make him move first. The man underestimated me once. He saw a cleaner. He just saw an asset. He failed to realize that the asset knows the house better than any security detail he compromised. My gaze was locked on his. And I'm not signing any indemnity clause, Mr. Yoon. I am signing on to neutralize the threat. We start by fortifying the perimeter he thinks is compromised. Give me the access codes to the main grid. His dark eyes widened, catching the reflected fire of my sudden, violent determination. The professional cleaner was gone. The savior was here, challenging the boss in his own war room. And the look in his eyes told me he found this new, fierce version of me utterly fascinating. The villa had become a pressure cooker, and I was holding the lid down with white-knuckled focus. I had taken the security codes, and for 2 days, I had run the operational side of our exile, not as a nurse, but as a tactical analyst using the house system. I moved silent sensors, rerouted cameras, and used the low-status access points I knew as a cleaner to create a genuine kill zone around the perimeter. Mr. Yoon watched me, fully recovered now, the bandage gone, his shoulder only bearing a thin, angry scar. He was physically whole, but emotionally, he was stretched taut. The tension finally broke late one afternoon. I was checking the perimeter firewall logs on the secure monitor when he walked up behind me. I didn't hear him. The man moves like a phantom, but I felt the wave of heat and power radiating from his body. "You've been busy, Chanel L. Bennett," he said, his voice low, dangerously smooth. "I've been securing your assets, Mr. Yoon," I replied without turning, my eyes glued to the anomaly in the network traffic I was tracking. "Your perimeter was compromised once. It won't be again." He placed his hands flat on the desk, caging me between his arms and the screen. The expensive, dark material of his slacks brushed against the back of my knees. The sandalwood and power scent was overpowering, intoxicating. "You're getting comfortable," he murmured, the words hitting the delicate skin near my ear, sending a tremor down my spine. "Too comfortable. You demand briefings, you reorganize my defense, you speak to me as an equal." I finally turned, twisting in the tight space to face him, forcing the air out of my lungs in a sharp gasp. I met his dark, challenging gaze, refusing to flinch. "You're alive because I acted, Mr. Yoon. I'm comfortable because I'm confident. You gave me the keys to your survival, and I won't let you bleed out again because you're too arrogant to accept help from the staff." My voice was low, laced with the anger that had fueled my actions since Christmas Eve. "And the babies," he challenged, his eyes boring into mine. "Are you doing this for the money, or are you playing savior for Kyung-yoon and Nari-yoon? Tell me your price now, before this gets complicated." He was testing me, pushing me to admit my loyalty was bought. My control snapped. "My price? My price is survival. I'm here because I signed a contract under threat of death, but I stay because I watched a bastard aim to destroy an entire bloodline just to secure his stock options." I leaned into him, furious. "I don't play savior. I saw 2 innocent lives caught in your deadly family feud. I know the rules now, no windows, no police, no mention of the mother. But you want my loyalty? You want me to tell you my price? My price is the death of Uncle An so these 2 babies can live in peace." The sheer audacity of my rage hung in the air, thick and volatile. He didn't look angry. He looked predatory. My honesty, my unfiltered anger, had only served to break down the last barrier between us. His eyes narrowed, not in fury, but in dark, intense recognition. "You are dangerous, Chanel," he whispered, the sound a low warning that was completely ignored by the frantic, desirous beat of my heart. He moved then, fast and brutal, asserting the dominance he had temporarily ceded. His hand shot out, cupping the back of my neck, crushing the resistance I hadn't even realized I was mounting. Before I could inhale, his mouth descended on mine. The kiss was an explosion, not sweet, not gentle, but a dark, urgent declaration of power and possession. It tasted of the forbidden, of sandalwood, of the simmering tension that had been building since I first tore his $1,000 jacket off to find the bullet. His lips were hard, demanding, forcing an answer from me. For a split second, I fought the sheer force of the assault, the violation of the NDA and the worker-boss boundary. But the fight dissolved instantly into a dizzying need. This wasn't about love. It was about the collision of 2 people trapped in a death trap, fueled by the terrifying shared knowledge of the secrets we now held. My hands, which had been pressing against his chest, rose to grip his shirt, pulling him closer, deepening the possessive, urgent exchange. When he finally pulled back, Our breaths were ragged, shattered. The room was spinning. He kept his grip on the back of my neck, his thumb caressing the racing pulse in my throat, a terrifying reminder that he was the boss, and I was still the asset. His dark eyes were blazing, and in them, I saw reflected the same shock, the same desperate hunger that had just consumed me. That, he grated out, his voice hoarse, was not in the contract, Chanel. No, I whispered, my lips tingling from the force of the kiss. But it was inevitable. The line between life and death, enemy and ally, employee and lover, had just been fatally blurred. The air was still charged with the violent aftermath of the kiss, a declaration of war and desire that was far more dangerous than the external threats. Mr. Yoon and I existed in a state of suspended animation, the physical tension between us so thick you could choke on it. He didn't apologize for the aggressive kiss, and I didn't demand one. It had sealed our fate more definitively than the NDA. We were co-conspirators now, bound by blood, secrets, and a terrifying, magnetic awareness. I had been running the tactical defense from the guest suite command center for 2 straight days. My eyes were burning from staring at the internal schematics and camera loops. He, meanwhile, was conducting his virtual meetings, manipulating the council from his gilded cage, proving he was still the boss even in exile. The twins, Kyung-yoon and Nari-yoon, were the only anchors to reality, their soft coos a fragile contrast to the chaos we were orchestrating. I was performing a final, late-night check of the old utility corridor that connected the guest wing to the main villa filtration system. This area was dark, low-ceilinged, and utterly ignored by the high-tech sensors, a perfect blind spot I had personally resecured after Uncle On's earlier attempted ambush. I had placed a microscopic dusting of specialized, non-static cleaning powder across the floor grate of a defunct air vent. It was a detail only a cleaner would ever think of, a low-tech tripwire that would show any intrusion, even the slightest disturbance of airflow. I crouched low, shining my phone's flashlight across the grate. Nothing. Perfect. Then I stood up, my gaze sweeping the rest of the corridor, my mind already cataloging the state of the fire suppression panel. That's when I saw it. The panel itself was seamless, locked down with a triple redundancy magnetic seal I had personally activated 24 hours ago. But on the dull, gunmetal gray surface, there was a minute, almost invisible scratch, a fresh abrasion, just a hair's breadth long, running diagonally from the top right corner. A scratch. Not enough to break the seal, but enough to show that someone had worked on it. Someone had forced a tool against the metal, trying to override my security measure. Someone had infiltrated the blind spot. My heart didn't pound. It simply stopped. On's man was inside. My mind went into instant, cold triage. No time for panic. No time to get the Beretta Mr. Yoon had stashed. The only thing that mattered was speed and the babies. I didn't run. Running makes noise. I moved like a ghost, back through the service corridor and into the opulence of the B2 suite. Mr. Yoon was in the sitting area, his back to me, the screen of his tablet casting a cold blue glow on his face as he talked, presumably to Han. I slid across the marble floor, my lightweight sneakers silent. I didn't speak. I didn't want to alert him until I knew the location of the threat. Instead, I reached out and slammed the secure door lock button on the console beside him. Clang. The heavy, reinforced door dropped, locking us into the suite. He spun around, fury blazing in his eyes, ready to annihilate the person who dared to interrupt his meeting. "What in God's name, Chanel?" he demanded, his voice a lethal whisper. I ignored him, my eyes already sweeping the room, checking the closet where Kyung and Nari were sleeping. They were safe. I turned to him, my voice flat, professional, betraying none of the cold terror gripping my gut. Utility corridor. Fire suppression panel. Someone tried to override the magnetic lock. They're inside the villa perimeter. His expression shifted instantly, the mafia boss replacing the frustrated exile. He didn't ask how I knew. He trusted the cold certainty in my voice. Who? He grated, his eyes scanning the room, already moving toward the cabinet where he kept the secure communication gear. Doesn't matter. They were testing the blind spot I secured. Uncle On knows the perimeter is too hot to breach from the outside. He sent someone to exploit the internal maintenance network. I was breathing heavily now, the adrenaline surging. They're not aiming for you. They're aiming for the only two people who can't defend themselves. He looked at the closet, a shadow of fear crossing his face that was far more potent than any fury. He knew I was right. His vulnerability was the twins. How long? He asked. 10 minutes, maybe less, before they find another weak point in the ventilation shafts. We have to move. I didn't wait for his instruction. I was already moving toward the closet, gently pulling Kyung-yoon and Nara-yoon from their car seats, cradling them close. He watched me, seeing the truth of my loyalty, not to the contract, but to the overwhelming need to protect the innocent. I had just proved that I was more than a nurse, more than an asset, and certainly more than a maid. I was the unexpected shield, driven by a fierce, maternal rage. He had tested my loyalty with a dangerous kiss. I was answering with a tactical, life-saving decision. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about survival, and I was leading the charge. 8,888. The villa didn't fall. It shattered. It was precisely 2 a.m., the dead calm of the most dangerous hour, when the reinforced security doors on the guest wing whined in protest. I had been tracking the infiltrator's movements, the spy from Uncle On, for the last hour, realizing he wasn't a single threat, but a pathfinder. They're not using the main door, I whispered, scrambling to seal the primary ventilation shafts with the custom metal plating I had ordered. They're coming through the filtration system, direct from the waterfront. It's a full tactical breach. Mr. Yoon, who was already armed and moving with the silent, lethal grace of a healed predator, didn't hesitate. He thrust the Beretta 92 into my hand. My fingers closed around the cold, familiar weight. You protect them, he commanded, his eyes burning into mine. I trust you with my life, Chanel. But I trust you with theirs more. He kissed me then, not the demanding violence of before, but a hard, swift press of lips that was both a promise and a final, terrifying goodbye. Go, he ordered, already disappearing into the service corridor I had just sealed. My heart was a war drum in my chest. I rushed to the closet, gently pulling Kyung-yoon and Nara-yoon from their car seats and wrapping them securely in the thickest bathrobes I could find. They were silent, their twin faces resting against my neck, utterly dependent. I had 10 seconds. I couldn't fight in the main suite, too open. I needed a bottleneck, a defensive advantage. I ran to the secure, refrigerated wine cellar, which was accessible through a hidden panel in the floor. I slammed the girls inside, hit the biometric lock, and scrambled back up. I didn't have time to fight Uncle On's soldiers. I had to use the environment, the chaos he had already created. The first two men were already in the suite, sleek, silent shadows moving with professional speed, their weapons raised. They were looking for Mr. Yoon. They weren't looking for the cleaner. I didn't reach for the gun. I reached for the fire suppression system's manual override I had located days ago. With a frantic yank, I pulled the emergency release. The room was instantly filled with a blinding, noxious cloud of halon gas, non-lethal, but suffocating and disorienting. They yelled, coughing, their vision dissolving in the chemical fog. I used the distraction. I grabbed the first thing I knew was heavy and available, the antique crystal carafe I usually refilled. I swung it hard into the face of the nearest assassin. The sound of the crystal shattering and the man dropping was sickeningly satisfying. I didn't stop. I found my second piece of equipment, the industrial-strength cleaning fluid I used for the tile grout. It wasn't lethal, but it was corrosive. I drenched the hallway carpet, and as the second man fumbled through the gas, he hit the slick patch, his feet flying out from under him. He hit the marble with a sickening thud, his weapon skittering away. I was the cleaner. I knew the hazards of this house better than its architect. But then, the final, most chilling sound, a heavy metallic clang from the service elevator shaft. Uncle On was here. I ran toward the noise, the Beretta finally heavy and cold in my hand. I reached the service elevator just as the doors peeled open. And there they were, Mr. Yoon and Uncle On, locked in a vicious, desperate fight. It wasn't a clean corporate assassination, it was a brutal, up-close execution attempt. On had a heavy combat knife, and Mr. Yoon was fighting like a man possessed, his raw power barely contained. The smell of copper and adrenaline was overwhelming. On twisted, his knife flashing, slicing a deep wound across Mr. Yoon's already scarred shoulder. My boss roared, a primal sound of pain and rage. He pinned On against the elevator wall, his hands wrapped around the younger man's throat. "You touch my children," Mr. Yoon snarled in Korean, his voice thick with blood and fury, "and I will erase your name from existence." He slammed On's head against the steel wall again and again, the sickening impact echoing through the shaft. I stood in the doorway, the Beretta aimed, my hands steady, ready to pull the trigger if On gained an advantage. But I didn't have to. Mr. Yoon was relentless. The betrayal, the exile, the attempt on his daughters, it all exploded in that final, devastating frenzy. He didn't use a clean shot. He used the raw, brutal power that earned him the title of Mafia Boss. On went limp, sliding down the metal wall. Mr. Yoon stood over him, breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his body slick with sweat, and the blood pouring from his newly reopened wound. He looked up, saw me, saw the gun, and saw the fear in my eyes, now mixed with a ferocious pride. He took 2 steps toward me, staggered, and leaned against the doorway, forcing the gun down. "It's done," he gasped, fighting to control the tremors running through his body. "It's finished. The line is safe." I dropped the Beretta. It didn't clatter, it simply thudded softly on the thick carpet. I moved to him instantly, ignoring the horrific scene behind him. My hands went to his wound, pressing hard, trying to stop the catastrophic flow. "Not done," I whispered, my voice breaking with relief and terror. "The fight is done. Now the nursing begins." I had never felt more alive or more terrifyingly in love with the danger. I had faced down the mafia, saved the heirs, and secured the kingdom. I was no longer a cleaner. I was the queen of the chaos. The silence that followed Uncle On's final, sickening thud was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of an abyss. The Christmas Eve nightmare was over, replaced by the gory reality of the morning. I didn't waste a second looking at the defeat slumping against the elevator wall. Mr. Yoon was leaning on the doorway, his massive frame shaking, his breathing shallow. The shoulder wound, freshly reopened, was hemorrhaging, and his entire left side was painted in On's blood. "Wine cellar," I gasped, guiding him, using my shoulder as a crutch. "The girls. Safe. We go there." We staggered past the chemical fog and the bodies of the 2 assassins I had neutralized with household items. I sealed the service elevator shaft with the emergency lock, sealing On's defeat inside the metallic coffin. In the wine cellar, the air was cold, damp, and blessedly quiet. Kyung-yoon and Nari-yoon were still asleep, oblivious to the war that had just raged overhead. Their perfect, innocent faces were the only thing that mattered. For the next 2 hours, I was back to being a nurse. I worked with the efficiency of adrenaline, cleaning Mr. Yoon's wound, resuturing the deeper tear, and pumping him full of powerful antibiotics. He submitted to my care completely, his eyes closed, his hand resting on the lock of the door, asserting his protective presence even in unconsciousness. The sun finally rose over the ocean, painting the cellar's stone walls with a weak, gray light, the dawn of a new, dangerous world. When he finally woke, the fever was gone, replaced by a cold, victorious clarity. Han, the loyalist, had arrived via the secure helicopter pad, silently taking inventory of the carnage and arranging for the cleanup with chilling professionalism. The pseudo-network was secured. The reign of Mr. Yoon, the mafia boss, had begun in earnest. He looked at me, sitting on an overturned crate, checking the twins' breathing. He was pale but majestic, a powerful, wounded king on his throne. "On is handled," he stated, his voice a low, steady rumble of authority. "The council has been informed. The vote is confirmed. I am the chairman of the pseudo-network. It is finished, Chanel." He pulled a small, engraved flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the crate beside me. "This is your freedom. The money you needed to pay off your debt, your degree, your future, all of it. And 5 times more. You are the only person who did not betray me. You are a genius with a scalpel, and you are a lion in the fight. You saved my lineage. You saved me." My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the realization that this was the moment of choice. The money was a colossal sum. I could walk away, vanish, finish my nursing degree, and live the quiet, debt-free life I had dreamed of since Christmas Eve. But then he reached out, his hand the same hand that had held the Beretta, cupping my jaw, forcing me to look at him. His skin was still warm from the fever, a branding iron of shared secrets. "But the contract has changed, e.g., he whispered, using the same choked term of affection he reserved for his twins. "I offer you another one. Not for money, but for perpetuity. The kingdom is mine, but the security is yours. The twins know your scent, they trust your voice." And his dark eyes held mine, filled with a dangerous mix of desire and cold, possessive need that felt like an unbreakable chain. "I am used to your proximity. The chaos of my world is safer with you in it. I need you as my anchor, as my partner, as my queen." He was offering me a life steeped in luxurious danger, wrapped in the intoxicating, terrifying awareness we shared. He was offering me the very thing I had always run from: absolute, complicated power. I looked at the flash drive, the key to my simple, safe future. The light on the drive was dull, insignificant. I brought my own hand up, covering his where it rested on my jaw, accepting the possessive touch. "My price has always been control, Mr. Yoon," I whispered, the words sealing my fate. "That drive buys me freedom, but it doesn't buy the end of the threat. Your kingdom has enemies. I'll start with the council." I leaned in, brushing my lips against his, a silent, irrevocable surrender. "And I don't take orders from the council. Only the boss." He smiled then, a genuine, savage smile that promised violence and forever. He pulled me into his arms, ignoring the pain in his wound, crushing me against his powerful chest. The kiss was no longer an act of violence or desperation, but an act of mutual, desperate possession, confirming our terrifying new reality. The scent of sandalwood and blood was the only perfume I would ever need. I had chosen the chaos. I had chosen the man. I had chosen the crown.